Okay, for the final episode of the Leaders Chain Diversity conversation series, I'm absolutely delighted to be interviewing Kate Green. So welcome, Kate. Kate is a specialist performance coach working with elite athletes across a range of professional sports environments, and I'm really excited to help others to understand more about Kate's brilliant work. So a really warm welcome to you, Kate. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you, Rose.
Fabulous. So should we just dive straight in? And the first question I've got for you really is to kind of a bit of history, so a potted history of your career today, and tell us a little bit more about your role, about what a specialist performance coach is.
Brilliant. So yeah, I've been working in elite sport for about 16 years now. Which makes me very old, or at least I feel it when I say that, because I felt I was very young when I came into it. And you and I actually crossed paths about 12 years ago when we worked together in cricket. So my first job was in cricket in elite sport, and I worked with academies and professional counties across the south of England. So I had 6 counties, and we crossed paths at Sussex, but I also had Surrey and Middlesex and Gloucester and Hampshire, and even as far over as Somerset. So Sunday mornings used to be great fun for me. I used to have to get up at about 4 because I lived in Brighton, and I'd have to travel to Taunton for an 8 a.m. workshop with their under 18s. And then I'd make my way across to Hampshire in Southampton, and I would do a workshop there mid-afternoon at about 1 or 2, and then back to Sussex for an evening workshop. So Sundays were a busy, long traveling and busy day, but I loved it. And so that's where I started out. I started out as a performance lifestyle advisor in cricket, and that was trying to help the academy and professional cricketers manage their lifestyles alongside the demands of the game and everything that came with it. And I did that in various guises over nearly 9.5 years, actually. So our portfolios changed. We sort of got more advisors on board through the Professional Cricketers Association, which means we each had less counties, which was good, because the ratio really in this work needs to be sort of fairly low so you can do decent work, whereas I was running around 6 counties. That was a lot of players to try and see. So in the end, they had enough advisors that we had about 3 counties each. And then I sort of managed England programs. So I actually moved up and started working with the England under 17s and 19s, the England Lions, the England team. And that was sort of a process over 9 years, and managed the team. So we then ended up with 9 advisors when I left in 2000. So I started 2005 and left in 2014. Where there was a really robust team in place across cricket, and a lot of good work was done and is still being done now. And I talk to those colleagues sort of in cricket now, and they really, I think, are one of the world leading unions in the space of wellbeing and welfare for their players. And PCA and ECB, the governing body, work really well together. But I'd sort of transferred and worked across both the governing body and the players union. And at that point, then I decided that I was dealing with the whole person. So it's very hard to sort of have your conversations only off field or only on field. And I became really interested in both the behavioral responses and abilities they had off the field, but I was also interested on the field. So over the last kind of 10 years, I've also retrained to become a performance psychologist. So I guess I now balance doing on and off field. It depends on what any particular environment needs, or what any particular coach needs, or individual. Some like to work pitch backwards, as in, I'm only going to talk to you if we're going to talk about the results on the weekend, and then we can talk about all the other stuff. And others want to come to you because they don't want to talk about the game. They know you understand what they're going through, but they just want to talk about off-field stuff. So it really depends on who I'm working with at any time. When I left cricket, I went to UK sport. So that was my chance to work with Olympic and Paralympic athletes. And I had a portfolio of sports, and I was a senior performance advisor. So I managed a team of people who worked across the portfolio of Olympic and Paralympic sports, and we just helped them with their short-term performance planning. So at the time, we were preparing for Rio. So we were 2 years out, and we were preparing for Rio Games whilst doing strategic planning for Tokyo. And obviously, we're at that point that much later, that both the long-term strategic plans I was doing then and the short-term, and both Olympics and Paralympics have been. So that was brilliant, because that was a completely different kind of job. That was strategic. That was working with the performance directors and the chairman and the chief execs. It was appointment of staff. It was looking at how well they're going against their medal targets. What was the system, running mission reviews with them, how well they were kind of tracking. So I loved that. And that was about 2 years. And then I got the chance to sort of go back into the coalface, really, and practice the more performance psych skills I'd been training with. So I went into football. So that was when I first went to Arsenal Football Club. And that's where we re-met again at a conference up at St. George's Park. Yeah, and I took on head of psychology and personal development for the academy. And this was now going to sort of challenge me to work with younger athletes than I ever had before. So under 9s to under 23s, and the transition into the first team and on loans and stuff. And I absolutely loved it. It was a chance to work with multidisciplinary teams, to be based across 2 sites, the junior site, Hale End, under 9s to 16s, and then the senior site. And at the time to work with some of the female players before we got a psych involved there, and just build a psychosocial team. So working with the player liaisons, working with safeguarding, working across the club, you know, and I just, yeah, so that was a phenomenal opportunity for about 5 years. And I finished up there last September. And I thought it was a chance for me to maybe to try something new again. And so I set up my own company, Green Performance Limited, with the ultimate aim of how can I help all these different people I want to work with sustainable performance. And so some of my clients, I mean, I took quite a big contract initially. So I was going to do lots of consultancy and part-time work with all the private clients I have and different sports, but I ended up actually working for the FA on a fixed contract for 8 months. So I worked with the Lionesses, who are the senior women's team, and with the FA, who turned into Team GB, and we went to Tokyo in the summer. So actually, ironically, after being there in strategic planning about 6-7 years ago in a different guise, I actually was on the ground as a performance psych, out with Team GB football team and the Lionesses. And that was an unbelievable experience for a number of reasons. COVID, for traveling finally, for being at an Olympic Games. Unfortunately, results didn't go away. It didn't go our way in the quarterfinal, but yeah, an unbelievable experience to plan, deliver that, and then review with the girls. Yeah, and then work across a number of different sports. I'm going to stop because I've kind of gone on a bit.
It's amazing. It's just so, I just love listening to you because it's such a fascinating career. And I think what I love about it is it's just covered so many different, like, I mean, the Olympics, for example, the whole array of different challenges of all those sports coming together and having to think in those so many different ways. I mean, I just find it absolutely fascinating. And I think it's great that you haven't just stayed in cricket or haven't just been in football. It's that whole plethora of, you know, everything's a new challenge, which I just love hearing about. And in terms of, like, when you look back, obviously you've done so much and you've been in so many environments, but what are the sort of key things, the themes about how the landscape's changed, and what are those real modern day challenges that elite athletes are facing today?
Yeah, I think the landscape's changed dramatically. I think when I started in sport in 2000, elite sport in 2005, there was the player unions were driving a welfare and well-being sort of agenda because they believed elite sport was pushing so hard, it was having a detrimental effect on the person. And I really bought into that. That's why I came into the job. I was really interested in people's stories. And what I knew was that I, like everyone, can get completely absorbed in the fantasy and the fairy tale of elite sports. It's amazing. Those highs, that goal going in, that particular final, you know, we all live for watching it and being there and being involved. And that's the same with every player who starts out in this journey. They were a kid who loved sport. And so I'm fully bought into that narrative. And yet there was a bit of me that was uncomfortable about with this machine that is ever pushing medal targets, ever pushing results-driven business. With all these young people coming in and the percentages of those that don't succeed, whatever we view success is, and this is part of the narrative I want to change, because success could be life skills that you go on to use in many different guises. But if you don't do the traditional route of becoming a medal winner or becoming, you know, is your whole story defined by those moments? So for a number of the female athletes that I was with at the Olympics, of course they wanted to medal, because medaling meant you've achieved a goal you've worked to your whole life. And if you don't, does that mean you go for another cycle? Or does that mean you can retire? Or does that mean you can? So many ambitions and hopes and kind of life stories are based around these outcomes. And yet there's these individuals in behind. And does that mean, you know, your 14-year career wasn't successful because you didn't medal? Or is the story behind it much more? And can we give emphasis and credibility and a sense of achievement to all those who go through it? So if I'm only at Arsenal from under 9s to under 11s, can I be glad I was only there for 2 years? And what did I get from that experience I can bring to my under 13 cricket season if I choose to go down another sport, you know? Whereas a lot of the hopes and dreams, and therefore failure, is wrapped up in these identities linked. So for me, the main thing that crosses all the work I've done, identity.
Sure.
Pressure, and how could I help people with pressure. And if I gave more and more systems and individuals the skills to deal with pressure, they can take that into any aspect of their life. So if you're dealing with a high pressure situation on the field, you can also do that in a presentation or an interview, or God forsake, if something, awful happened in your personal life and you had to deal with a major transition. So it's definitely the narrative has changed. Not only is it the governing body, not only is it the player unions, I think governing bodies see their role and responsibility far more seriously. I think there's an understanding that alongside technical, tactical, physical, mental is at the table in terms of if we're going to develop these players, let's develop them holistically. So I think that's changed. And I think we're getting to a point, we're getting far more comfortable with the whole kind of conversation about mental health. I think, and that being mental health, like you'd say, physical health, as opposed to the connotation that used to be mental ill health and a problem and a weakness and a secret. And, so the positive reframing of all of that, I think, is really helpful. And predominantly, so the biggest challenge I've had in the last year is I moved into female sport, which I've absolutely loved. But prior to that, it was 15 years in male sport. So the narrative, changing that has been harder than actually probably having been in a more mixed environment.
Wow, so it's just fascinating. It's just great. And I think, like, when I look back, so again, you've worked at the elite level with adults, and like you say, going into Arsenal and suddenly, having to switch your mindset to an under 9s player, then an under 23s the next day, and everything that goes with that journey. And also working with Paralympics, Olympians, and also working with women. I mean, when you look back, if if someone said to you, right, you've got to pick one group of athletes to work with, which group do you think would give you most satisfaction working with?
Yeah, that's such a difficult question. And that's not even me sitting on a fence to kind of be like, what should I say? I've loved all the different challenges because they pose such a different challenge. So whilst they're all humans and performance is the backdrop of what I've worked in, so the change, depending on the age, stage, and everything else, is the bit that I've really loved. So honestly, the last year has been such a phenomenal learning experience and challenge and excitement for me, because I've been working with a whole different, set of athletes. I've been working with Ballon d'Or winners and elite female sort of professional footballers, and I'd never worked with female teams. I'd worked with a couple of female athletes, but not as a team. And there's a different dynamic, and there was a lot going on that I could sort of learn about and make sense of. And they were an incredibly inspiring group of girls who took some real big stands. We had very big meetings before we even left the country about whether we were going to take the knee or not. And we did a huge piece on the diversity of what it stands for in this country, what the WSL had been doing all season, whether we were going to go and do that, whereas the Olympics stands very much for its own set of kind of values and everything else, and it doesn't like demonstrations. And so we had to work with the wording, we had to work with what we were prepared to do, we had to then let the BOA, the British Olympic Association, know, and the kind of FIFA organising. And effectively, before we even left the UK, because of the stand the girls had taken, they had changed the rules by the time we got out there. So by the time we got out there, we weren't taking the risk we thought that we were going to have to take, because they had actually generated change in the rules and everything else. So they're an unbelievable group of girls, and there was a real fight and determination. So that is something I never even expected to take on or work with. Just like the under 9s, you don't sort of understand how much you're going to be working with the parents. So yeah, I don't, the answer is I like the fact I've been privileged enough to change so many times to get all those learning experiences. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And then sticking with the kind of gender thing, so obviously we're talking about women. I mean, obviously we work in an environment, and one of the things we're all trying to do, and I'm sure you're trying to do it as well from a different angle, is to try and encourage more women to see sport as a profession, to address some of the gender imbalances, and to encourage more women to come into our careers in sport. What do you think we could do more of to help that journey?
Yeah, one of my favorite campaigns in the last year has been actually one on an Irish social media channel that I follow, 2020. And it's if you can't see, you can't be. And for me, a huge change in the TV rights, in having women's football and rugby on TV, on terrestrial TV, as well as paid TV, but having advertisements and poster boards. And you go to most stadiums now in the country, and there will be one of the female players as well as one of the male players up on the board. I've watched a lot of cricket recently in the World Cup, but it's the men's T20 World Cup. In the past, it would only have you know, it would have been the T20 World Cup or the women's, you know, it's a very add-on. Things have really evened up. And I think that's where it starts. It starts by being inspired by watching your hero do something. It's by young girls looking on and seeing, you know, broadcasters, journalists, the media, the bench represented by physios and coaches of mixed sexes and of mixed diverse backgrounds. It's of the players that you look up to and seeing yourself in someone. And you know, there's a number of girls that I've worked with in the last year who've had various different things going on, and they've gone, but there's no one like me. There's no one like me. And they're at the top of their game, but they're the start of being like someone for someone else. And so that's why there's a role and responsibility for those people in those positions. But I think it's the more we can highlight it, advertise it, and that's the kind of, what do we put out to others and encourage them in. I think the next bit is how we as systems look to support those journeys. So if there is less equality, which there is in the current elite sports space, especially in the male one, but in both, how do we logistically support people? So what are our maternity policies like, and our return back to work? And I've worked with a number of female practitioners supporting them in the transition back, because actually a lot of confidence can go, or a lot of current knowledge. So there's transitional support. So there's all that infrastructure we could build better, as well as having good mentors and people who can help you through it, people who've been there, and people who can help you stand up for what you believe in or support you through the challenges you might face. I think they're the things I've thought about a lot recently.
Yeah, definitely. And have you found as you kind of progressed, I don't want to use the word getting older because we're not getting old, but have you found through your career that you've felt that responsibility and you've always kind of grown into those boots a bit, in terms of, you know, we've got a responsibility to other women, haven't we, to encourage and almost kind of be the change that we want to see? And I think certainly, you know, I feel that at Brighton, and you know, I kind of see my role as empowering other women and creating space for confidence to grow. And you know, it's become a really important part of my role. But the ironic thing is that it's kind of happened at the same time as my own confidence has grown. So do you feel that as well in your environment?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a lot of me that took it for granted in the early years. If I was the only female there, of which in male sport 15, 18 years ago, I was a lot of the time. So there would be many extended tours abroad with teams. So you're talking 2-3 weeks. That would only be when, and I'll never forget it, I think I was on an under-19 prep camp for a World Cup. And we were in South Africa doing the prep camp. And one of the coaches was South African. And his mum turned up at the hotel to drop him off a little care package. And she saw me and she went, "Oh, love, are you here with the boys?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she went, "What are you?" You know, as if expecting me why you'd be here. And she was so lovely. And I was like, "Oh, I'm the performance lifestyle advisor. I help the players off field and help manage their exams and doing study and all this different stuff." And these are like 17, 18-year-old boys. And she was like, "Oh, amazing." She goes, "Well, listen, I'll tell the coach, I'll take you out for a cup of tea, because, you know, being around these men the whole time for 3 weeks must be hard work." And it was someone else's perspective said in a really open way, when I didn't really think that much of it. But I remember that sticking out and being like, "Oh, do you know what? A cup of tea would be lovely with you, stepping out of this all male environment just for an hour and going down the road and having a cup of tea and a coffee or a slice of cake." But it was funny because I never thought about it until someone else used to say things to me, or you'd have those conversations when you turn up at pitches. There was an assumption all the time. People would ask what my job is. So there would be a question about, why are you here with the team? As opposed to, they didn't ask my male colleague next to me, but it was something I just got used to or didn't really take offense to. So it's either a combination of, I've got quite thick skin and I maybe didn't take offense to a lot of things that could have offended me. I had good mentors and support, and I had great allies. I had great female and male bosses along the way, but especially the male bosses in a lot of the jobs, who encouraged and didn't see a difference. And so they were as kind of equally supportive and didn't really buy into that other narrative.
Great. That's really great. That's really great. And so one final question for me is, if there's a young woman watching this interview today who would love to be the next Kate Green, what would your advice be to her?
Absolutely do it. I do beam from ear to ear when I talk about the privilege and jobs I've had, because I've absolutely loved every minute of it. It is equally sort of enthralling and exciting as it is challenging. So go for it, but be ready. Be prepared to do both the hard work it takes in terms of sort of literally the hours and the travel and everything else. There is a very unglamorous side to elite sport, But also, I think when I say be ready for the personal journey. There will be a lot of personal development. There'll be a lot of soul searching. There'll be a lot of rebuilding, resetting, resilience needed. It's the same skill set psychologically and personal development as the elite performers, because you're in an elite environment. So there's a lot of pressure. There'll be a lot of contextual changes. There'll be a lot of dynamics going on, and you'll need to know yourself very well and track yourself to stay hold of who you are in amongst all of that. So do it, be prepared, get really good support around you, good mentors, good infrastructure, and just keep going with the journey and keep evolving and changing.
Oh, that's brilliant advice. So Kate, I wish I could talk to you all day. I absolutely love listening to you. You've made me fall in love with working in elite sport all over again this morning, and it's fantastic to hear your story, and I'm sure people listening will also have enjoyed every single minute of that. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you very soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. And anyone who does want to get interested, I'm sure, as you would do, the offer of anyone contacting me at any point is always open. And hopefully see you soon. Take care.
Great stuff. Thanks, Kate. Take care. Bye.